Hi there, and welcome back to Scholarly Writing and Publication from Vanderbilt Linkages. I'm Dr. Sam Gannon, and I'm going to be walking you through Session 2, which is entitled Integrity and Compliance. We're going to begin this section on integrity and compliance with falsification, fabrication, and plagiarism, or FFP as it is commonly called. So how do you define misconduct? Take a minute and jot down a few words. What comes to mind when you hear the word misconduct? What are some of the things that go through your head when you think about misconduct and what's included in misconduct? So take a minute and jot a couple things down. Hopefully you got a couple of thoughts down. Let's look at how we define misconduct in the scholarly realm. Okay? So it really involves those three pieces, right? Fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. Fabrication is simply the making up of the data, filling in gaps, creating your own data, that kind of thing. Falsification is altering or changing your data. And then plagiarism is copying from yourself or someone else. And it's important to note that when we think about FFP, that it's going to be something that's willful and something that's intentional. It does not include questionable research practices, things that fall out of the norm within a discipline perhaps, but that don't rise to the level of fabrication, falsification, and plagiarism. And it also doesn't refer to accidental things that were not willful or not intentional. These are not included in the definition of research misconduct. We're really just talking about FFP. Now, there are plenty of questionable things that occur that perhaps is not the right thing to do, or we could question someone's ethics, but it really doesn't fit that definition of research misconduct. One important component is that I want you to be sure that you understand is there's two pieces here, integrity and compliance. And in the big world, integrity is much more important than compliance. Compliance just means you're doing the minimum. You're doing what's required of you. Integrity calls on you to be compliant and then some. To do not only what's expected, but to do what's right, to do what's good, to do what's ethical, to do what's honorable. So I want to encourage you to focus on integrity and not necessarily focus on compliance. Let's dig in on plagiarism. Plagiarism can occur in a number of different places. This is just a few. Text, tables, data, even diagrams and pictures. All of these areas can have plagiarism. When we think about plagiarism categories, right, we think of the extent of the plagiarism. How much plagiarizing was done, right? We also want to think of the intent. Was the person's intent to plagiarize? How unique were the quotes or the passages that were plagiarized? What type of material was plagiarized? And what degree of referencing was done? Was there an attempt to do some correct referencing and citations? Was there just no attempt at all? Was it just blatant, right? So these are some things that editors, that academia looks at when they look at plagiarism. So it's a cautionary world, right? Don't do it. Don't plagiarize. But should you find yourself in that boat, whether it's accidental or otherwise, and you want to think about it, these are some categories that are important in plagiarism. So as I mentioned, self-plagiarism is also an issue. In some disciplines, it's not a big deal. In others, it's a really big deal. So be familiar with your discipline, your area, the journal you're submitting to, that you're not copying yourself. You're not hitting copy and paste and putting two different articles together. Close copying can also be an issue. So when you are paraphrasing or when you're writing on your own, be sure that you're not just changing every couple of words here and there. Copying, but not copying the exact words. That's called close copying, and it's also called plagiarism. So you want to be mindful of that. So these are some things to consider with FFP, some things you want to do as you're working through your process and your writing. When you see something that you want to paraphrase or something that you want to cite, document it right then and there. Put a date on it, put the time on it if you want to. Go into detail on what you're going to copy. Be sure when you're taking notes to use quotes and that you're also documenting this in your notes, that you're putting the citations in notes. Be intentional about this. A lot of this is sloppy time. A lot of plagiarism charges are based on sloppiness. And even though they're not willful or intentional, sloppiness is not good practice. It does not look good, right? So you want to be intentional about doing the right thing. And you also want to be vigilant. Don't stick in a quote and go, oh, I'll get back to that later. I'll fix it later. Fix it now. Take the time to do it right this time so that you can avoid FFP. As always, feel free to reach out to me with your comments, your questions, and your concerns.